Welcome to Metabolic Matters podcast, where we embark on conversations with thought leaders, disruptors, change agents, and passionate souls. Together, we'll delve into what truly matters to them. And you'll learn how to metabolize this newfound wisdom so you can transform your own metabolic health. Now let's meet today's guest. Okay, this is going to be a good one, I think. I mean, aren't they all? But this one in particular. And before you've had a little bit of intro about who the man, the myth, the legend is. What I'm very excited is I want to tell you a little backstory about how Dr. Paul Anderson came into my life. And so he didn't start in my life. I don't even know, Paul, if you know this story. But back in the late 90s, my then boyfriend, now husband, Steve Ottersberg, was in charge of the biochemistry board reviews at a number of the medical schools while he was finishing up his PhD in biochemistry. And he sadly left that position as he moved on to work for Merck, which in and of itself is another funny story. And you took over. And I want to tell you, for probably 2 or 3 years, your name would come up and Steve would be like, damn him. He'd never even met you, but he was so certain that you stole something from him or that you somehow would not be doing as good of a job as he would be doing. He had quite a story going in his brain that, I mean, this is what's so funny. He would always see you as the guy who took his favorite low-paying, no-paying gig away from him. So he so wanted to despise you and just out of sheer jealousy, until we finally met in person some years later. And it was incredibly clear that you are kindred spirits, that we are kindred spirits, that you are clearly a brother from another mother, that the backroom troublemaking sessions that we were actually starting to talk about before the recording hit, that the number of getting shushed in the back of the room, I'm sure outnumbers anything that the three of us have kept track of over the years. But basically it's hard to believe that there was ever a time that we did not know Dr. Paul Anderson, as you have been so near and dear in our hearts and in our minds. And it's just an absolute joy to have you here. So welcome.
Thank you. And just so you know, yes, I knew about that because the very first time I met Steve, when you left the room, he told me. But he also told me that he got counseling around it and he felt better now, and that I seemed to be an okay guy. So but no, he had to tell me right up front, that there was a whole history I had no idea about.
You weren't involved in that story. Apparently, he made it so.
Well, that's because I think we're connected on some other level, and it truly was like a crappy paying job too. Like it's not, I didn't
really
take it. He was gone. So anyway, no, I did know that, but I was very happy he'd made peace with me before he met me, and.
I love this. And the other thing we were talking about before we came on here is, at some point, anybody who knows both Steve Ottersberg and or Paul Anderson, we've just decided that we are going to do a podcast of the two of you at some point, and that we're just going to kind of set you loose, sort of maybe Joe Rogan style, maybe a little bit of mezcal in the background to see. We were just talking with Lynn, like sort of the drinking with historians, or what is it that old show. We think we could probably come up with solving the world's problems with the two of you in a room together, or at least your belief systems that you could do that. So it's really fun to have you here. One of the most intelligent people I know, and one that is so without ego around it, which is really refreshing in medicine in general and academia in particular. And so it's really fun to have you here. So I thought we'd start just by asking a little bit about you and your career background, because I was kind of going through the list. Correct me if I'm wrong. You started out or had some moment in like the light world, the physics world. You had you've had multiple lifetimes. So teacher, IV guru, clinician, conference facilitator, researcher, writer, FDA expert witness or target, depending on the day,
like I said, this expert, and when I was at a photodynamic conference not too long ago, it came to light that, and I mean that pun sincerely, that you have expertise in this area. I mean, my God, you have been at this a very long time. And by this, I mean the sciences, the practice of medicine, the teaching clinicians, the doing of research. Of all these hats that you've worn, what would be your favorite and why?
Oh boy. Yeah. So, you are correct. In 1976, I got my first job in a lab, and I was going to go to medical school, and then I kind of thought, oh no, I don't want to do that, and time marches on, all that stuff. So I had different iterations prior to being a physician in kind of hard sciences, as physics and light, but in the interface between that and medicine, and that and some other cool things. I was parts of groups that invented things that had never been invented before in that world. Sadly, the patents were borrowed by a government agency, and so we didn't get any money. So that then I had to make a living, and I thought, well, I should go back to medical school. And what? So
default.
just so people know, my father's mom and dad they would be quite old, but they passed away. But dad was a physician, mom was a nurse. Okay, so I grew up in that environment. Not all, the majority of the people we knew were other doctors, and so this is sort of, that was my growing up. But what I started to realize as I kind of moved through the lab world was I saw the way medicine was sort of going in the 80s. And I thought I would get in a lot of trouble. Like, I mean, this is no surprise to you, but I don't think, because at that time they were starting to get more and more narrow and more protocol driven and sort of less creative and, whatever. And there's good to both sides. But I just thought, man, if I went and I was, like a specialist, like my dad or something like that, I would get bored, and B, I would start to get into other things that would get me in trouble in the system. And so that caused me to sort of kind of stay out of medical school a bit. And then I encountered actually a naturopathic physician at the recommendation actually of my mother, the nurse, who nurses don't always trust doctors that much, by the way. So, but my kids, I have very old adult children now, but when the older two were little, a lot of allergies, a lot of other problems, and so she said, "See this naturopath." And I thought, "You're crazy," and he became a close friend and was so knowledgeable, but also it was like there was like nothing he couldn't do. And I thought, oh, I could do this, because I probably, now keep in mind, I have gotten in trouble as a naturopathic physician, but I would get in less trouble doing that, right? So that was sort of the trip, and because of my background, this, in 1 month, I start my 30th anniversary of teaching naturopathic people. I'm probably at my 40th anniversary if you include lab people and stuff like that. So I've been teaching a long time. I really enjoyed my private practice early on. And I didn't start out to do cancer specifically or chronic illness, but literally within 6 months, people figured out I did IV therapy and other stuff, which at the time was illegal. So there you go, people. Statute of limitations is long gone and all that. But so I got this sort of underground, kind of cancer group of folks, and that started an odyssey that's gone on for 3 decades now, and so it's because people will say, well, did you must have gone into this wanting to, do a lot of cancer work and all this other stuff. And it was like, no, I went into it. I wanted to be a family doctor and kind of have a general practice, and that, but what I didn't realize is none of that was under my control. It's like once people figured out, and you get one secret cancer patient, and then, you get more of them. And so suddenly then you have to learn. So I think a lot of us, you, me, a bunch of us, our learning curves were very, very steep. Because there was maybe 5 people in all of the U.S. that at least outwardly would say they were doing integrative oncology, or 5 centers or something like that. And what we knew then is a thousandth of what we know now, right? So it was like, okay, I'll give it a try, I'll do. So I think that what I've been, I don't know, I've enjoyed everything I've done ever. I've really enjoyed the fact that my practice stayed kind of half advanced cancer. I just, my practice never had any of what the easier, lower grade cancers. It was all advanced cancer, and it has stayed that way forever. But the other half have been people with very complex non-cancer diseases, some of which don't have names and that sort of stuff. So this has kept my brain busy.
And out of trouble.
And out and in trouble. Because of that experience, though, about 10, 12, I don't know, a while ago now, I was asked to join a research project that the NIH was funding, and it was human research. And they had started this integrative oncology center, and they want to do IV therapy. And they realized after the first week that you actually had to know how to do that. And they didn't have anybody. So they recruited me in to run all the interventions. And so that was 5 years worth of time. And I was a full professor at the time, or during that time. So that was a lot of fun. Like I never would have forecasted I was going to do that.
Wow.
We learned a ton of stuff. I've written some books about cancer, and now I have a private practice that is capped because I can't take any more patients, and that's fine because there's other people. And I spend the bulk of my time trying to educate other doctors just like you, because it's like, even if you and I were to live forever, which we're not going to, there's so much need in the world of oncology that I feel I can do more for humanity putting my effort in that direction, and then I take care of my little group of patients I have, and we're all happy.
Well, and thanks to you, I just came from just a couple weekends ago, one of your amazing conferences that you put out in the world, the AAMP conference, which you changed the topics because of your experience, because of your interest, and because of your connections and collaborations in the world. Maybe give a little just 2 cents about what AAMP was and how, why you created this amazing twice a year conference for all your colleagues.
So it's advanced applications in medical practice, and our goal, which so far we're doing okay, is twice a year we have an in-person conference. Nowadays there's a virtual version and an in-person. It's a hybrid, as all things now are.
Yes.
They all started in person, but anyway. And the goal really was, there's this large group of integrative providers, okay, under, some are naturopathic doctors, some are integrative nurse practitioners, some are MDs or DOs, or some are PAs, some are nurses, whatever. So it's like, well, there's this group, and because I teach for so many different places, I just thought, well, there's a lot of places to kind of get the entry level information. And there's a lot of places to get like uber specific information about, this type of a treatment or something like that. But the gap I was trying to fill from, and my end of the business is curriculum and getting the doctors to speak and all that. The gap I was trying to fill really was, what if you're just out there slugging it out every day, and you sort of learned the hard way, and you've learned from classes and all that stuff. Can we get people together every 6 months who are kind of practicing at a high level, who can say, here's some ideas to take you to the next step?
Love it.
And that's what we do. And we do an oncology one every 2 years on a rotation. And then the other 3 in between are either, they're topical. So we have one coming up on neurodiversity and all that is, and the complexities. Prior to that, we've done them on just about every chronic illness area you can think of. So that's how it came about. That was the one you went to was our 14th one. I know, and again, something I never would have thought I would be doing. And then every month I have a website for healthcare providers. I do a very short, compared to 3 days of CE. I do a 1.5 to 2 hour webinar once a month for my group online, and it's similar but bite-sized.
I love it. And that's just it. It's just, again, I'm hoping that the listeners who don't already know you, you bring so many resources to so many of us who are out there in the trenches. So I'm really, really grateful for that. And so this kind of leads to my next question. After all of your years of being in the trenches and in research and meeting and training clinicians and learning from clinicians and researchers your entire career, what is most surprising to you that still hasn't changed in general medicine today? And perhaps cancer in particular, but it could be more general, that you feel that should actually at this point be like standard of care? What is are there moments where you go, why is this not just part of the deal?
Well, I'll start with the concept that I think maybe has surprised me the most, which shouldn't, but it has. And then there's a lot of examples of it. And this even goes way back to pre-medical school. As I said, as part of a working group, we invented something that was theoretically impossible. And I was tasked to go out to very big companies who needed this impossible thing because they were all looking for this answer, and tell them, we have the answer, we'd like to license it to you. And I went through the longest string of people, PhDs who know better, people in that science, saying, you can't do that, it's impossible. And I was like, no, we did it. I can show you. And they're like, no, you can't do that, it's impossible. One after the other, after the other, after the other. And so I think that when you're trying to make change, human nature is very resistant to change, and medicine and other sciences, they might want an answer to a question, but if they don't know what the answer is, they're very mistrusting of people who come with an answer to a particular question, right? And so I will tell you, because it happened this morning. Okay, so that was a long time ago. However many years ago, the early 80s were, that was when I was first just hit in the face with human nature about that. This morning.
Oh boy.
So it started yesterday, and then this morning. So I'm currently part of 3 different research projects, which we hope they're in different areas of the world. One, I had a meeting though with the researchers yesterday, and we're tidying up everything, looking at the data and trying to figure out how to translate it to clinicians so that they do the right thing and don't do the wrong thing. And it's something that I've been arguing with people about for about 20 years now, because they were taught inappropriately something that looked good on paper but doesn't work out. Well, anyway. So anyway, yesterday we get through and we got our new data, and it's it sort of proves the point. So this morning I send a message to a clinician, but they're in charge of, they would be a thought leader that would help get the message out.
Yeah.
And basically the first thing I was hit with was exactly the same as, 40 years ago. No, I'm not going to tell people that, because that doesn't match, this sort of misnomer that we've all banded around in our heads for 20, 30 years. So I guess the surprising thing is that we're all humans. Human nature is the way it is. And so if you take just that concept, and that it happened all those years ago, and it happened in the last 24 hours to me again. And it was well, I can't really, we haven't got it into the publication. I can't share all the stuff, but I have data, it's not like I made it up.
Yeah.
And so it's I think then if you take that and just take it a step out, just in the world of oncology, there's so many things that are, that's part of why I do as much teaching as I do. There's so many things that are like, if we could just get over ourselves and let go of some things, we could move forward, and like I said, then that could be 1,000 things, right? It could be stuff, or, it could be stuff around, diet, which is we all know about that. It could be stuff around specific therapies. It could be stuff around conceptual approach to cancer, um, or it could be things like there's some which I've also done recent sort of smaller research reviews on and stuff like. There's a lot of misappropriation of newer ideas like ferroptosis and cell death and stuff.
Amen.
And a lot of, it's like, it looks easier than it is to interpret. And then you get somebody who maybe doesn't quite get the nuances and they try to interpret it to humans.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, a bunch of this is great information, but like this actually doesn't work out, or you would have to kill the human, in order to make that work. So, I think this is the older, more Zen Paul, because 10 years ago I used to still get really turned up about this. Now I just am more like, well, there's just more education and work to do. Please.
Very Zen with a grumble under the breath.
Yeah, it's like it's a rough Zen that I have, but at least I would be redder now. But I think it's like realizing, okay, this is human nature. This is the way people have always been. They don't like change. They want simple answers to complicated questions, and usually those don't exist. And so we just have more work to do to enlighten and inform people and say, look, it's not that this is all bad or all good.
Exactly.
It's got a place it fits, So anyway, so I know that's not one thing, but it's a concept, and I think because I run up against it like all the time.
Yeah.
It's I think it's frustrating, but also with the new gruff Zen of me, it propels me forward to say, well, let's do better education then. Let's try and explain it better. Let's whatever. So
nice.
So that's my story there.
And you're sticking to it, at least for now. But this is, I think you spoke to, it sounds like you're describing the concept of cognitive dissonance. That even when the truth is literally standing on your foot, slapping you in the face, you're still like, nope, nothing to see here. Yeah. I am, my gosh, you and I have actually spent many conversation, I think, over the 20 plus years we've known each other, having these conversations about, are you kidding me? Are we really having this conversation again? So I think that's really interesting. And then you spoke, you alluded to the nuances and the sort of that this isn't black and white. We are such a culture that wants it very like everybody standard. This is standard of care, that this is the protocol we apply. And, the 80% will respond and the other 20% are just outliers and we just sort of ignore them. They don't really count. Right. And so I feel like you and I live on the fringes of the outliers, many in our field, but we also recognize that there is no such thing as black and white, yes or no, always, never. It's so nuanced. And that is, I think, what has to come with experience and a willingness and a curiosity to keep the parachute open of our mind and to keep putting yourself out there, learning from colleagues like yourself and many others out there. So I just think that was actually a really beautiful answer, because it doesn't matter what the topic or the situation was. It's this ethos in general that we're up against.
It's us humans that we're in the way most, right? And I think that, nuance is something that's hard. It's really hard to teach nuance. Like, you can conceptually teach it, but you have to feel and experience nuance, and because I have a group where, like you do, where I answer questions and all that fun stuff. And, people will be like, but if the, X therapy at this level does this and at this level does this, I can't do them both at the same time. And I was like, okay, let's take a step back
Nice.
Number one, we don't know that much about it to say it's only this and only that, and all that. But I think, I had normally have an easier time with patients than I do doctors, because they'll come and they'll say, well, how does this therapy work with my particular cancer? And I'll say, well, here's the thing. I've actually done research on it. We were hoping to find these threads of, with this type of solid cancer, this is always the best thing or whatever, I said, guess what? The type of therapies we do work with your body, and your body is very different from the person with the exact same cancer sitting next to you. So how it's going to do is up to how your body, deals with and biochemically resonates with the therapy or whatever. And we can see trends and things like that. But like, if your body is kind of coming in fresh and it hasn't had a lot of immune inhibition, it hasn't been beat up, and, the train's clean and stuff, we can do sometimes miraculous things. If your body is over here and it's just been beaten to a pulp chemically, we have a lot of work to do to get you to where, you even feel anything. So I think that, so with patients, that wasn't what they wanted to hear, but they would internalize it because it was that made sense to them on some level.
Right.
Healthcare providers have this layer of education that dissociates them from that.
Right.
And so they would really prefer to be able to just tell someone, well, this is what I do with this type of solid tumor.
Exactly.
And there's nothing wrong with that. We would like life to be easier, but it's not. And when you have cancer, cancer is lots of things, and cancer is as much about all your healthy non-cancer cells and how they're behaving, and as the evil cancer cells are. So I think nuance is a great word for it. And if there's one thing I feel like I've learned in all the years, in all the as not all of our patient experiences are as wonderful and happy ending as we would like. And I think the learning through the hard way with all that, it's like you have to be like, you can never think that you know enough. Number one, you have to be very open. You have to be ready for the patient to teach you stuff. And you have to be honest with them to say, I'm going to start where I think we should start. If your body tells us we're doing a great job, well, high fives all around. We'll keep going. If your body says, hey, no, that's not me, we're not going to keep pushing you down that road because I think it's a good idea. Your body has to think it's a good idea too. So I think that it's like, that's been probably the biggest lesson. And that's a tough thing to teach people.
Yes.
And I often tell people, so I have this practice that I can't take any more patients. I say that out loud because people would refer more people to me, and it's
can't take new patients, folks.
I don't have a single patient who reacts even atypically. Like, they are all there every day to humble me, literally, and to say, even the most like out there thing that works with all the margin of the bell curve people. Guess what? That didn't work with me. You better start thinking of some new things. They don't say it that way, but that's what their cases are telling me. So I have somehow devolved to some sort of practice that is just there to teach me that I don't know as much as I think I do.
Oh, that's so beautiful. It's actually so beautiful to hear that, because it keeps you hungry and curious and striving, to be there. And I think that's a really important one. So I think some colleagues do reach a point in their career where they think they've got it figured out and that's their protocol and they're sticking to it. And that's the fastest piece of humble pie you'll ever ingest right there. So I think that's pretty interesting. And it's one of the things that's really wild is, and again, I've known you for a very long time, and because I've been my own N of one and helped lots of people and learned from lots of people, similar to what you just described. our best teachers, right? And known and kind of been on parallel tracks and learning from you over the years as well. You've always been someone who's really supported just me in general and many of our colleagues, but I feel very, pleased. I just like you've been someone who takes the time to support just who I am and what I'm up to. And you were one of the few and first providers who really were able to go there with me about the metabolic approach to cancer. And you seemingly grokked it on your own well before you and I ever talked about it. And, neither of us were taught this in medical school. And in fact, no one's taught this in medical school all these years later.
Absolutely not.
I mean, I can't, but that's one of the things that I get frustrated with. I'm like, seriously, we're going to have this, we're still having these conversations. We've literally disproven the somatic mutation theory as the starting point of cancer more times than you could shake a stick. So, but I want to know how you would, if you were sitting on an airplane next to a fifth grader who said, what's metabolic oncology, metabolic approach to cancer? What do you mean? What would be your elevator spiel that you would use to describe it in a nutshell?
Yeah. I think that especially, fifth grader probably will accept things better than an adult. So I'm glad you gave me a fifth grader. But I think that the way that I like to think about the metabolic approach to dealing with cancer is that there are in the research kind of two big pathways. One is, lifestyle and terrain and diet and toxins and all that stuff that change our metabolism and change our epigenetic signaling and all of this business that lead us to bad metabolism, which can lead us to turning on, the wrong genes and cancer and all that. But then there's also this other pathway that is, and I was just listening to an oncologist at 2:00 this morning because I couldn't sleep, and I listen to oncologists to put me to sleep usually. So, but he was saying, I don't even know how many cancers there are. He says there's at least 1,000, if not more, because there's so many that are all different. And I thought, well, A, how honest, and B, he was saying, look, we really don't know as much as we think we do. But in that macrocosm of all these different types of ways you can experience cancer in cells, there are metabolic faults that the cancer cells are either trying to use to survive better, or they're just sort of made that way, and it makes them either neutral or more resistant to treatment or, other things. So like you've got your body maybe being messed up through toxicities and other terrain issues, and then you've got cancer that develops, and then it takes advantage of its own internal metabolism problems that it has. Yeah. And when those two things hit together, that's usually when we figure out we have cancer, right? So it's sort of like the metabolic approach then has to consider both sides of the equation. What has happened to our body to get us there, and what can we do to help that? But also, and the problem, if we're to believe my oncologist friend from last night, say there's 1,000 different types of cancer, they don't all act the same way. They some of them have one group of gambits they like to use, and some have different ones and stuff like that. So then that tells us that we have to work on the human part, which is what got us there, and the cells that don't have cancer, and cleaning things up. But then on the cancer side, we have to do things. I would tell patients, I'm doing metabolic therapies to weaken your cancer cells as much as possible. They don't like this, right? Yeah. This is not their optimum operational, milieu. And so if I can get you healthier, and I can do everything I can to just push the cancer cells into a weak state, your immune system and other treatments and everything have a better chance, right? Yeah. But if we don't acknowledge both, you miss, it's not like 50-50, it's like 100% coming together
very
in
nice.
The world of cancer. And frustration I have a lot of the times in all forms of oncology is, it's cool to know about the little switches to turn on and off and all that stuff, and that can be very helpful. And it's also cool to know about all these little things that cancer cells do. But like, if we only focus on that little part there, and we're not focusing on how do we make the human stronger and a better fighter, et cetera, and how do we make this cancer as marginalized as we can so we can minimize it or beat it up or whatever, we're missing most of the game, and I think that's really a problem. And I'll have medical students or doctors, they'll be surprised at any number of things I say, I suppose, but one thing they'll be surprised about is that if you get too reductionistic and you just go after like these couple of things that look shiny and maybe are, an impediment to the cancer, you're missing most of the power of being able to treat that patient, through their metabolism. And the other thing that will freak people out is, and I know you've had lots of experience with this, a lot of my longest lived stage 4 cancer patients, from the very beginning of meeting them to 5, 10, 15 years later, and they're still alive, on imaging, they have all the same amount of cancer that they used to have. It's just not doing anything at all. And in the beginning, it was very metabolically active and it was causing other problem, all that stuff. But it's like, but you get a student and they're like, wait a minute.
What?
So what is it? It's like, well, it went to sleep. We took advantage of the fact that there was a more healthy person, and and it doesn't make it's not a magic eraser for cancer. It's like it's just asleep, and a sleeping cancer is much better than a very active cancer. So I think that those things all intersect. But I and again, that's a lot to juggle in your mind as a clinician. Like, oh, so I got to figure out what screwed the patient up in their body and their health and everything. And I have to tend to, what's the most that I can do to beat up on these cancer cells, make them weak and make them an easier target, right, for treatment. So, now most 5-year-olds, I would have lost them at that point, but it's something I think about trying to transmit to providers a lot. Usually with the patients, I just stick with, you've got more healthy cells than cancer cells. I care more about them than the cancer. Actually, we need to get them working. Cancer, we can push into a corner metabolically in most cases and make it weak. I want to make it as weak as possible. You strong, cancer weak. That's our goal. Let's see what we can do from there, And and I think, I timelines are I don't do timelines well. Too many head injuries, but I think I came upon like metabolic approaches to cancer. They even made sense when I was like go back to like the 90s, when everyone was saying it was witchcraft and would make worse cancer and all that stuff. And it's even made sense then, chemically speaking. And, so I've always kind of had that in play. And then through the cancer research, I was actually able to start to mess around with some, actually manipulating people's metabolism, and then looking at, okay, if I manipulate it from the outside, does it make a difference then if they manipulate it with their diet and with these other things? And here's the pitch on that. The more things that get manipulated, the better it works. Literally you're getting me on I was hot this morning, boy. Literally this morning, I told somebody, because they were all excited about this one this one kind of important chemical manipulation you can do with cancer from the outside, right? But my reply to them was, look, I read all your stuff. Well, obviously they didn't read they didn't read all of it. I said, if you go back and read it, what you'll find is this one manipulation is very, very weak unless it is surrounded by all the other things that make it work.
Yes.
And so and I know it's easy. We like to focus because I can do this one manipulation myself to the patient. But it's like, if we don't do the other stuff, you're putting, you might get a little bump of an effect or something like that, but it requires everyone to swim in the same direction as much as possible. And I've not heard back from this doctor, so I don't know if they've internalized that or not. But yeah, it's like, and of course there's variations. Some types of cancer have more sensitivity in one way or another or whatever. But it's like that. If you take yourself out of the cytotoxic, let's just kill cancer cells, which has a place, but it's like a little slice of the pie. If you take yourself out of that, it's sort of logical that, like, if there's things I can do to make the organism hosting the cancer stronger and make the cancer weaker, I've got a better chance. I mean, that seems not illogical.
And it's interesting, the conversations you and I have had with our patients for the years, they get it immediately.
Yeah.
They're on board immediately. It's intuitive immediately. It's some of our more entrenched clinicians in all fields, not just in the conventional, but even in the naturopathic world and integrative alternative world is sometimes surprising to me. It's very sexy to go after the pathways, but we often forget about the person those pathways are living inside.
Yeah. So, where they have to work. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's big. And so that kind of is like a beautiful bridge over to this question I have for you, which is, you are well loved, well respected, especially for your intellect, for those who know you. But those who are a little bit beyond that initial ring, we also know that you also have an incredibly ginormous and sensitive heart. You're also your gift and your curse. Your book that you co-authored with Dr. Mark Stengler really speaks to that angel on the shoulder of the very outside the box cancer therapies, the very tangibles, the data behind a lot of the therapies that you may or may not use with an individual, which I think is really a huge resource and tool for clinicians. The other side shows the other side of your personality, which is your other book, Cancer and the Journey from Diagnosis to Empowerment, which is just really the beautiful side of your heart. And in all the years that I've known you, personally as well as professionally, and as much as you will allow for me or those of us that care about you close to you, we've also witnessed an overwhelming amount of loss in your life of close family members, of best friends, of young patients. And I'd really like to know how you meet grief and loss, and perhaps words or actions of encouragement that you need from us or that you could share with us.
Yeah. I think that's, if there's something that sort of is an exact parallel to my journey of thinking I'm going to have a family practice, and then within 6 months having all these cancer patients who most of them were ready to die and all of that, and then starting to get pediatric cancer patients real early who are not doing well. If there's something that's a parallel between my learning about how to treat cancer patients and all the technical parts, right, of cancer therapies and all the blah, everything over all those years. The other parallel is directly related to grief, loss, but also just dealing with the reality that you affect people as much as you can in the moment you come into their life, but you have no control over where that's going. Like you can do everything you can to try and help, right? And a lot of times we help a lot, and that's great. And sometimes we help, just by being there, but the person doesn't maybe live very long, etc. And I think that, so if I'm looking at those two sort of trails, in the very beginning, I wasn't ready for it because no one teaches you that that's a part of the deal. I mean, it is, but there's not really, unless you had like some amazing mentor, and we didn't. There's nobody to say, look, this is, you got to be ready for this as well as this, and you have to be, and all of that. So kind of, I think we all had to learn that the hard way. And so now it's sort of like you go to this other end of the spectrum, and I know so much more about the therapeutics and all that business. I'm also more just conscious and aware that we all, we carry our own grief, we carry our family's grief, we interact with it, that sort of thing. And when we have people, we have to let go of the idea that we have any sort of control over how their outcomes are going to go. We do the best job we can. They do the best job they can. And the rest is up to everything else other than us. And it doesn't make it when things don't go well or somebody dies, it doesn't make it easier. Right. But it makes it less soul damaging, I think. If I rewind my mind back to the early days in especially the first child who passed away, all of it, like, I went through a patch where I literally told a friend, I'm not really doing oncology. I'm more of like a midwife to dying people. That's what I've become, and I really hit a patch. And I think that was there to teach me. I'm a slow learner, so it was a rough patch. And I think it was there to teach me a very hard lesson about, I've got my own stuff around all that. And I also need to know where does Paul stop and where does, their world begin. So I think that's a big part of it. And I guess, as you mentioned, there's sort of two major cancer books I've been involved with, and outside the box being more just the tools to use, and also really we wrote it. The reason we put all the references in are not because it's a textbook so much as you can talk to your oncologist when they say there's no research, and there, you can show them that there is. So there's that. But then in reflecting as we were rolling that book out, and I was starting to mentor a lot more doctors at that time, I thought we have a chapter in there, about the mind, body, and the spirit and all that stuff. But I think we need like I tell people, and actually this book is used in the journey from diagnosis to power is used in standard oncology units. Usually some nurse brings it in or something. Because it's agnostic to how you treat your cancer.
Exactly.
What we know scientifically is that if I'm an empowered patient, I have better quality of life. My, pain management works better. Other drugs work better. There's no downside to being an empowered patient, right? Medically speaking. Cancer is the most disempowering thing, one of the most you could probably think of. And so the whole book was just from this journey I had of trying to sort that out, but just every day talking to people about where you at with this and all. And then, a little bit of science in there just to show, we did our homework. That book really is about, it doesn't matter, how you're treating it or whether you're going to live a long time or short time. You need to deal with this in a way that makes sense to you and become the most empowered patient you can, because those people, if we both sit down, we look backwards over all the patients, the empowered people generally have better quality of life. They generally respond to therapies better. They're generally more open to doing, stuff that we might want them to do. All sorts of good things come from that. So yeah, that's sort of, it's almost like a yin and yang of the cancer world.
Exactly.
And they both came from, the first book was more all here, and the second one was all here.
Exactly. And I think that you really show us the complexity of who you are, because I think that, you know, in your field, as long as you've been out there, there's many people who just know you as the intellect. And a few of us have the beauty of knowing you as the, you know, the big teddy bear, as well. And the combination of the two is actually what makes all of your teachings and all of that you share with us come alive. And so I really love to see the integration of those. And you even spoke to it really beautifully before I asked you that question about, you can aim at the cancer cells all day long, but until you deal with the condition,
Mm-hmm.
and that condition may be the diet, the lifestyle, the environmental exposures, but very much the mindset, the psyche, the spirit, the level of empowerment or disempowerment. You just really wove that together in a beautiful bow, and I really appreciate that. And so, in my final kind of thought or question for you to leave with all of us, I guarantee that you have impacted hundreds, if not thousands, of doctors with your wisdom and your wit. So, number one, kind of a two-part question. Do you see any signs of hope on the horizon with regards to a better way of caring for our cancer patients?
Okay, so I get to pause and answer one question at a
Yeah,
time.
I'll let you
Okay,
do that.
it's not like the White House. All right.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah. Yeah, you know, it's yeah. Short answer is yes, and it's interesting. You had mentioned, you know, you went to the, just what was it, 4 weeks ago? We did the oncology conference, and I went into it because, you know, my job is also wrangling speakers, and like, you know, like doctors are, you get these really smart people, and it's just like squirrels, you know, and you got to bring them in, and 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 you're trying to tell a story to the audience, and it's, you know, so I have a lot of other things on my mind beyond what I'm trying to teach. And I was having a bit of existential crisis, as I do, but right before these things, and it's like, oh God, you know, this could be so overwhelming because we went really deep on some stuff and whatever. And someone who I have in my life to help me stay centered and help with my mind body work, which we all should have some professional there.
Yes,
I
indeed.
was just saying this beforehand, and they said, you know, because then there were other things that happened that were even, you know, tragedies that intervened and all this stuff, and they said, you know, what you should probably think of is that the core of what people are looking for beyond all the technical stuff is hope. And that stopped me dead in my tracks, because I was like, you know, my brain has been so busy trying to get all this set up and all these things to do, and it's like, that's true, you know, like beyond all the technical stuff, which can really get confusing, providers want hope, patients want hope, you know, all of that, and I think that I think the way I look at it now is my hope is always tempered by the fact that there's a lot of external forces that don't really like what you and I do. But that doesn't mean that there aren't more external forces that might help us and move us forward. And so when it comes to hope, when I think of hope, it's like, if I take 3 decades apart and I look at the first decade and what I knew and what our community was able to do and everything, we did pretty good, did the best we could. If I compare that to the last 5 years, it's like that is such a quantum leap just in what we all know, what they know in standard oncology, what we know, you know, the whole thing, right? So it's like, my hope is, if in 30 years that's happened, and we're, you know, it's like, wow, compared to there, look at what we're doing, you know, and if the last 5 have been even more, you know, kind of spinning up and more helpful, imagine, what we can do as we keep moving forward and trying to learn, and we get more people doing this and all of that. So that's where my hope comes from, is that is a core thing people want, obviously, and it's a legitimate thing that all humans should want. And we have evidence to show that there is hope. If we look backwards, we're not who we were 10 years ago or 5 years ago, but especially not 30 years ago. And we can do, better work. We're getting better at it. And 10 years from now, who knows? I think it's not static. Humans aren't static. Our knowledge isn't static. So that's really where that's where hope comes from. And I think I have tons of that.
Beautiful. And the final part of that question is, what legacy do you hope to leave for future generations? He's taking a shot at tequila for anyone who's not watching. No.
Do you know what's sort of funny? This is water. But there's a few herbs in here that the person who is helping me with my mind-body connection make sure that I do those while I'm speaking about sensitive subjects. So that's the only reason I haven't cried yet or anything like that, is this herbal infused water over here. But anyway, again, like every other answer I've had, it's like, I never thought I'd do that.
Yeah.
It's like my whole life has been being open to, what's the next thing that I can do? As opposed, I've had general ideas of directions, but it's like, you don't know, what's around the next corner and all that. I think when it comes to legacy and stuff like that, I feel very fortunate to be in the current era where, in addition to writing books, which is one way to leave legacy, we have so many electronic means that we can leave ourselves behind, right? And one of the reasons that, like 8 or 9 years ago, I started the CE website and all that stuff was, I realized I was answering the same question over and over and over. And I was like, there is this thing, electronic world that I could put this on, and that would be there whether I'm there or not, as long as people know how to use the search function. And I can, distill into courses things that come up, and and then we, as I go along, I look in the future and I say, people are not doing very good understanding ferroptosis, or they're all excited about this treatment or whatever, and I was trying to break it down and make it like, okay, here's the shiny good part, here's the part you got to be careful with, here's the science, and here's where it's going. So I really feel like, aside from human connections, so let's say for the sake of argument, that this magic herbal water doesn't work, and I drop dead after we get off the thing here. You will still know me. You will still have some legacy of me that you carry forward. So there's a human part of the legacy, and I have encountered lots and lots and lots of students over time. So there's that. But I just feel very blessed to be able to keep putting stuff electronically into the world, because that I try to ignore the impact that I have, because for a variety of reasons that probably a psychiatrist.
Your wife wouldn't let you into the house if your ego took that on.
Yeah, that wouldn't work. So I kind of just, unplug, but it's like I'll run into people and they'll be like, you remember? And I'd be like, wow. Or people in other countries or other stuff will say, hey, I really appreciated what you did about whatever. So I think that's what I'm trying to do. It's obviously trying to educate people, but also it's like, now, I want to say on the record, I plan to live a long time. So
we're planning on that with you. So for the record,
I don't plan on going anywhere anytime soon, but my brain works so much that I have to have an outlet to tell people things. So I feel like that's that, and then the people I leave behind. Those are the two big parts of your legacy, I think.
Well, you really speak so much to the doctor in Latin is docere, which means teacher. So I think that's really powerful. And that's a perfect way to let this go, just in sharing my absolute gratitude for you for being my teacher and teaching me how to teach. And so thank you so much, Dr. Paul Anderson, for all you do.
Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun, as it always is. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Metabolic Matters. We hope you found today's conversation insightful and empowering. As we wrap up today's episode, we want to take a moment to acknowledge the incredible team and supporters who make this podcast possible. First, we'd like to thank our production team, Alex Sanchez, Cindy Kennedy, Jessica Gilman, and Lynn Hughes, for their hard work behind the scenes. Our theme song was written by Julie Newmark and performed by Whiskey Flower. And finally, we want to thank you, our listeners, for tuning in and being a part of the Metabolic Matters community. Do you want to learn more? Please visit our website, metabolicmatters.org, and you can follow us on Instagram. If you liked this episode, please leave us a review and share it with your friends and family. And if you want to help support our mission, spreading awareness and knowledge about metabolic health, reach out. We'd love you to join with us. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on upcoming episodes. We have so much exciting content coming your way. Until next time, stay curious, stay empowered, and remember, your metabolic health matters.